Hi, everyone, and welcome to this session at the CSA AI Summit. This session is about setting the standard for AI agent safety, security, and reliability. And we're going to really talk about the challenge that business leaders face who are adopting AI agents, and in particular, the tension between adopting AI quickly and keeping up with competitive pressures and making sure the products remain secure and safe for your use. And so I'm going to host this panel, and I'll just briefly introduce the panelists now. First up, we have Jim Rivas from CSA, who of course needs no introduction, but in particular in this panel, we'll be talking about how the CSA's AICM interacts with AIUC-1, this new agent standard. Secondly, we have Marco from 11 Labs, who's the head of security there. 11 Labs, of course, are leading the way with developing AI voice agents, and he'll be talking a bit about the security measures they're taking there and how they keep up with these pressures. Thirdly, we have Sanmi, who's a professor at Stanford University. Sanmi leads Stanford's Trustworthy AI Research Lab and has spent the last decade and more really thinking about how do we advance AI agent security. And then lastly, we have Runa, who is the co-founder and CEO at the AI underwriting company. The AI underwriting company has developed this new AI agent standard, AIUC-1, which we'll be spending a lot more time on today. And previously, Runa was Anthropic's first product hire and a founding board member at the Center for AI Safety. I'll be hosting this, and I'm also a co-founder at the AI underwriting company and excited to get into it. So my first question is for Jim and Runa. Maybe Jim, we'll start with you. Congratulations, firstly, on launching the AICM. We heard a lot more about that yesterday during the session. Would love to hear from you. What role do standards like the AICM and AIUC-1 play in the AI security ecosystem?
Yeah, thanks very much. And thanks everyone for joining this and joining our summit. Really appreciate it. So in fast-moving areas in technology, and it only seems like it's going faster and faster, we find that there's like so many areas that just can't keep up. And it's really key that organizations think about what are the best practices. And when you are trying to understand how you can manage those risks, you don't necessarily have like, well, here's the laws we need to comply to. There are a lot of existing laws, but a lot of it's in flux. And so the standards that subject matter experts create end up being referenced a lot by a lot of, whether you actually were in some sort of a legal challenge or if it was civil litigation. It's all about what are the defensible best practices based on the time you were operating, the circumstances of it. You did what were considered to be the best practice approach. And so the AI controls matrix for us, it's something that it's sort of an outgrowth of our cloud controls matrix, because we saw that AI was being delivered, generative AI, primarily through the cloud. And this has really been something that a lot of organizations said, this is our standard, and they use that in a way to maybe address different laws, like the EU AI Act is another thing that we're doing mappings to. And so these end up actually not being sort of adjuncts, but they kind of end up being the heart of compliance programs, of what laws end up referring to, and what insurance companies try to use as markers to understand if you are doing a good job in addressing the risks in those organizations. And so we're really excited about working with AIUC, because we have kind of by a necessity try to keep our control objectives at a pretty high level of abstraction and to create some level of endurance of those. But this is moving so quickly, and we've found in our exploration of the AIUC, it has a really sort of a sweet spot of a level of specificity on some very important measures people need to be thinking about when they're dealing with models and they're moving forward with generative AI programs.
That's great, Jim. Thank you so much for sharing. Runa, maybe you want to come in with how you approach this from an AIUC perspective.
Thank you, Jim. And just jumping in here, maybe my first reaction to you, Jim, is we're just really inspired by how comprehensive the AICM is. And so we're really excited to have collaborated with you guys to make a full crosswalk from AIUC-1 to AICM, and that's available online. As Jim said, AIUC-1 is designed to cover all of the risks that enterprises are concerned about at a level of specificity where we can get down to things like hallucinations, tool calls, jailbreaks, data leakage. What are the technical requirements, the technical safeguards that need to be in place, and what are the technical tests that must be run to see whether those are effective? And so just like SOC 2 enabled secure cloud adoption, we're hoping that AIUC-1 can secure the kind of adoption of AI agents.
Thank you both. Runa, tell us more about what does the process look like to get certified against AIUC-1, and in particular, how can business leaders use it to know that they can actually trust the security of an AI agent they're deploying?
Yeah, the starting point for AIUC-1 is helping enterprises answer the question of, can we trust this AI agent? The standard itself breaks down into 50-odd requirements for the safeguards and the test you must run to meet the standard. And the output of this is a 100-page audit report that in great detail covers how a company meets it. The process itself starts with a gap analysis, where we map on what a company's practices are today against the standard to see what is the work that's required to go and meet the gold standard here. Then we work with them to put safeguards in place. Some of those are technical, some of them are legal, some of them are operational. And then we go in and run red teaming and evals to see how effective these are. And we think this independent red teaming is incredibly important. And at the end of it, we issue a certificate, and as I mentioned, a detailed report that's intended to give complete transparency on how the safeguards, which safeguards are in place and how effective they are.
Marco, maybe on that note, I'll bring you in. 11 Labs have clearly been building incredible capabilities, but also handling huge amounts of sensitive data, customers' privacy concerns, and things like that for many years now. How do you approach this problem, and what are the practices you're adopting to really stay ahead of this?
So Clemens have several state-of-the-art AI audio products, but here I want to talk about the 11 Labs agent platform. This is used to create end-to-end AI voice experiences to do things like customer support calls or voice reminded of important events. There are currently more than 2 million agents on our platform, and their security is paramount. When a customer needs the high levels of confidentiality, we do something called zero retention mode and process data without leaving our cloud VPC. This, combined with the work of our security team and safety teams, has allowed us to have a platform compliant with PCI and HIPAA, among other standards. We want all agents to be as secure as possible, and the AIUC-1 mission resonates with us. Aligning with the industry on best practices can build the safe and secure AI platforms that we need for this technology to really be useful for mankind.
Wonderful, Marco. Thank you for sharing, and we've drawn a lot from how you're approaching that. Maybe we'll talk a bit more about that later. Maybe I actually bring in Sanmi next. Sanmi, you've been researching this from the academic side for a number of years now. You've just heard what Runa shared about what are the concerns that matter and how Marco's adopting some of those. You also very kindly were a technical contributor to AIUC-1 and helped develop that. Maybe you could share a bit more about how does AIUC-1 bring together the best of the academic research on this and make it applicable to industry?
Thanks, Rajiv. So, as you mentioned, I lead Stanford's Trustworthy AI Research Lab, where we're developing, we like to call it AI measurement science. So we're thinking about this as rigorous measurement theoretic foundations for understanding the risks and capabilities of AI systems around all aspects of what it means to build and deploy both AI systems, AI agents in the real world. And I think this is crucial because we both want to understand the capability surface, we want to understand the risk surface. So as you already mentioned, tools like AIUC-1 can then build us into standards that protect AI systems for various kinds of real-world deployments. For instance, the kinds of work that 11 Labs is doing with their voice agents. So we've done a variety of different research projects that try to probe the vulnerabilities of AI systems. We've done work on jailbreaking of various kinds. This is the work that tries to get various kinds of AI systems to behave in potentially adversarial ways based on external actors. We've done work showing the extent to which you can have transfer between different models. So how easy is it to train a jailbreaking strategy in one model, try to get it to work on a different model. This is a recent paper we just published. We've done work on best event jailbreaking. These are ideas where attackers can try compositional approaches using simple strategies, but scaled up by repetition and scaled up across lots of different models, showing that you can use these techniques to have quite high success rates across lots of different model families. I think these kinds of research questions have profound implications for AIUC-1. It means simple point safety checks aren't sufficient. You really do need a holistic approach to think around what it means to have sort of good security safety stance for enterprises. And I think what's great about what AIC1 is doing is that it's incorporating so much of what the cutting edge research is. So it is built as quarterly updated, up to date on what we're learning. It's this brave new world of AI deployments where so much, I think, is changing about what we learn and what the potential risks and vulnerabilities are, including the opportunities. And so research directly informs the requirements that are being shaped within AIC1 around real-time monitoring, anomaly detection, adversarial testing. This tight coupling, I think, is really unique and I think quite important for building a living standard that can withstand what it means to deploy AI systems at scale and right now in modern world.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, Sanmi. And is it fair to say also a lot of these techniques are moving so fast that actually a standard like AIUC-1 with its quarterly updates and the third-party testing really can just give the business leaders the confidence that a third party keeping up with your research has applied these techniques?
Yeah, I think that's super important. I think to your point, yes, having trusted third parties that have unbiased view on what it means to have, again, a good security and safety stance on AI systems. So can vet your systems, these taxonomies that help understand the vulnerability surface, capability surfaces, I think is extremely important. And AIC1 as I think, to my view, the best example of this we have so far. And so I think it's great as a way to frame these questions, give enterprises confidence in developing and deploying AI systems.
I wonder if we can go a bit deeper into voice. The voice modality is obviously one of the fastest growing. It unlocks a lot of use cases for AI agents that previously were harder to break into. Maybe Marco, to you first, and then to Sanmi. Would love to hear from you a bit more about what specifically makes voice agents hard, and in particular, voice agent security with some of the techniques that Sanmi was just talking about.
So voice for AI is a quickly evolving ecosystem. As Sanmi mentioned, there's a lot of challenges. But one of the biggest challenge is latency. So we need any audio experience to be quick, to be very high quality, and we are working here with almost real-time systems. So all the security that we add and all the safeguards that we add, they need to run very, very quickly. They need to basically be able to identify, to recover, to realign on sub-second stages, because people will find any change in speech and they will be able to gather a lot more information than in text. So the quality bar is much, much higher. But here we do add safeguards, we do add security, but a lot of this needs to be done before the agent is deployed. So we add testing, so people can basically analyze how the agent will work in different environments. Things like the AIUC has the approach of doing adversarial testing, checking everything before an agent is deployed. And this is definitely like, with how sensitive people are to latency and quality, a lot of work is done before the agent meets the first human.
Sanmi, maybe say a bit more from your research perspective. What are some of the techniques that are kind of important, and what's coming out of the literature on this?
Super interesting and important points that Marco brings up. I think voice is, to Marco's point, it's a newer attack surface compared to most of the existing research around security and robustness, potential vulnerabilities, mitigation techniques, and the research ecosystem. There is lots of work that's adjacent, and I can say a bit about work that I think is relevant for some of what's evolving in the voice ecosystem. So I mentioned briefly earlier some of our work on adversarial transfer. So the extent to which one can use some existing model and build vulnerabilities that you can then deploy to closed source systems. And we're understanding this better. I think some of these questions would be even more relevant for voice systems. This interplay between the open source systems and the closed source systems where the vulnerabilities can be. Voice has to handle both the biometric data and content simultaneously. I think this dual nature, again, in some ways increases the attack surface. So adversarial attacks can target either dimension. You can think about impersonating identity, but you can also manipulate content that's being generated. We've done some work. I mentioned some of the best event jailbreaking where we looked at the vulnerability along these lines. I think the latency point is extremely well taken. I think Marco pointed out. Voice, people are extremely sensitive to latency in voice. And so any either attack or defense strategy has to be very low latency. And I think finally, again, this question about transfer and to what extent attackers can deploy offline and deploy online, to what extent defenses should be offline and protection, how much of the protection needs to be online as well. I think these kinds of questions are some of the most interesting on the research side that we've been engaging and trying to explore recently. I think on the positive side, a lot of our research, again, anchors on we can do science to make these kinds of vulnerabilities much more predictable. So it's not a surprise where we should anticipate issues come up. So predictability, measurability of security and safety and robustness in AI systems and voice systems. And I'm very excited about standards like AIUC-1, which create a framework for this kinds of systematic testing and defense, allowing us to turn what can be this really chaotic Wild West security problem into a manageable risk that enterprises can engage with in sort of logical and predictable ways.
Sammy or Marco, we've talked a lot about the concepts here, the different kind of adversarial attacks and the latency and things like this. Some of our audience might have been primarily working in tech so far. Maybe just make this real. What's an example of a voice-specific attack that is now possible, and what would you do to prevent it?
There's some older stuff, but I think some of the early attack surfaces, there were these news stories about examples where people would create inaudible audio content that would get your Google Home or Amazon Alexa to say or do something. So these were audio content. Humans would not necessarily hear it, but machines would pick those up, and these would end up being vulnerabilities that attack behavior of these systems, potentially create sort of security gaps. So some of these issues, these are oldish. I'd say 5-ish year old research. I think because of this, there's been time to build safeguards. These look like guardrails and filtering against, again, these sort of low frequency or frequency outside of the hearing band kinds of attacks. In the best event paper, some of what we found were playing with sometimes with background sounds have a similar effect. So in this case, it's audible, but you look for combinations of these audible sounds that are in this, we sometimes talk about jagged intelligence for modern AI systems. So in this gap where they turn into vulnerabilities, even though ostensibly they're just, again, sort of regular interactions on sound with the AI system. Against these systems, I think to Marco's earlier point, we've done a fair amount of work on what sort of red teaming, so this is pre-testing, pre-deployment, to understand to what extent existing systems are vulnerable to this. And so you can build sometimes very simple protection systems, again, things like filtering. The more advanced contextual ones we build guardrails for. And so you're building AI systems that detect when you could be going off the rails. These have to be very fast in real time, and use these to make sure you have good protection for your systems against these kinds of issues.
A sophisticated attacker can insert background noise at the right points and use that to jailbreak a system. Marco, how do you deal with this at 11 Labs?
So there are two main ways currently people are deploying AI voice systems. One is the fused system, in which you get like a multimodal LLM that is able to take audio and output audio directly. This, as Sandy said, it can be quite unreliable, and you need to, in the labs needs to work quite a lot in making sure that the responses are robust and there is no jagged intelligence. Like expected input sends expected output. And unexpected input is able to be normalized away. We use what we call a cascading system. So we have very fast systems to transform audio that are high quality and they are very tested and they are very reliable. So we pick reliable pieces and we are able to basically test every single one of them separately. And then we do very high performance infrastructure work to be able to to cascade everything together into a system that basically is real time. But because we're able to do AI in a modular fashion, we are able to test everything to a much deeper degree, being able to eliminate a lot of these situations that are based on the unexpected behavior. So we are able to introduce modules that review in each piece separately. And that's how we basically identify issues, identify vulnerabilities, and we are able to improve them much quicker. As the modules are smaller, and we are able to produce newer versions much quicker.
Bruno, one of the questions that I think most frequently comes up to us, but also to folks like the CSA on the AICM is how can a single standard adapt and apply to all of these different types of attacks and modalities? So maybe say a bit more about how you're thinking about AIUC-1 for voice and what does that adaptation look like?
Yeah, one of the core design principles around AIUC-1 is to help security and risk leaders keep up with the frontier. The way we do that is that we publish quarterly updates to the standard. And those updates are based both on real world data, like incidents that are happening in the real world, research papers that are coming out, but also huge amounts of input from the ecosystem around it, which are both some of the disruptive companies that are building this technology. It's also partners like CSA and enterprise themselves that are walking around these concerns every day, and new surfaces bubble up that we address with the standard. One part of those things is that new modalities take off, voice being a key example now. Computer tool use is kicking off, video gen is kicking off. And the way we think about it is that we partner with some of the disruptors that are building that technology to really wrap our heads around how's that being deployed today, what are some of the things that are being seen. And we've built a framework that is, AIUC-1 itself is flexible enough to adapt to new modalities, both at the requirement and at the evidence level. And specifically in voice, there's more to come that we're going to announce shortly. There's some really interesting and exciting developments that we're baking into AIUC-1.
Maybe as we move towards closing, Jim, what's your biggest piece of advice for security leaders who are adopting AI agents today, and what should they take home from this?
Well, I think certainly a security leadership, they need to really take this risk-based approach and to really understand the business goals of an agentic transformation that's going to happen in their organization. And that kind of goes without saying. I think these tools can provide a lot of help with that. I would say also we're sort of moving from this, at least from our perspective, of our first sort of generation of generative AI adoption to what we're calling we've got to secure the agentic control plane. And I think that it's really incumbent upon organizations that are deploying agentic now is definitely don't build the most complicated agent with your first implementation, and you can often build upon agents and have multi-agentic, but start simple. But it's critical that we have the telemetry and what's been described. Some people might think, well, those guys have been talking a lot about the research things on voice, but that's actually defeated two of the multi-factors that financial services depends on. Those things are being defeated right now. So I think it's really important that we have a lot of automation and telemetry and logging. And so things like model context protocol, this would be something to say, hey, how can I ingest AIUC and then be able to do some continuous monitoring on the agentic transactions, for example, that happen between agents or from agents to legacy systems. So it's risk-based. It's use these standards that are available as your defensible best practices. It's very careful, thoughtful automation with a lot of like verbose telemetry that you're storing, and so that you can learn from it and make these things better. But definitely, get started. This is a competition out there, and we understand there's a lot of pressure. But if you need to start simple, definitely do that.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. Thanks for sharing. It's a fast-moving and complex space, so need to start somewhere. Maybe Runa, you want to close with just some thoughts on where is AIUC-1 headed in the future? What's upcoming, and how can some of the audience members today, security leaders, risk leaders, compliance leaders, get involved and benefit from AIUC-1?
First, where is AIUC headed? It's growing in two different axes. First is as the technological frontier moves, the standard is going to move. I mentioned voice, video generation, computer tool use, and more autonomous agents. As these start to get deployed, the standard is going to keep up with the kind of new risks that's going to bring to us. Secondly, we've already mapped AIUC-1 to a number of the kind of AI frameworks that are out there today, and we're going to be expanding that to a lot of the frameworks that risk and security leaders are using that are industry specific. So for example, in finance, we're crosswalking AIUC-1 to PCI to make sure that as you guys are adopting AI tools, that you remain in compliance with the industry standards that you must meet. In terms of how the audience can get involved with AIUC-1 today, there are three ways. Firstly, AIUC-1 is public and open source, so you can go to AIUC1.com, read it, start adopting the principles, the requirements, the controls, seeing how it crosswalks to all the frameworks you're situated in today. And so you can start building in and around it today. Secondly, we have built an enterprise consortium of risk leaders. So the CISOs, the directors of security, legal, risk, and compliance are coming together to have this conversation around these novel risks and inform the standard. And then thirdly, we're having an increasing amount of conversations with enterprises that are looking for support on how they bake this into their procurement processes and vendor adoption frameworks. So how they can basically ask their vendors to certify against the AIUC-1 to give them the transparency and the data they need to make those decisions. So feel free to reach out, and we're happy to have some conversations around how we can help.
Jim, thank you so much to you for joining us and for the whole CSA team on the collaboration on the AI controls matrix and partnering with us on AIUC-1. Sanmi, thank you to you and your team at Stanford for the collaboration on really how do we bake in the best of the AI research into AIUC-1. And Marco, thank you for joining us on injecting the perspective on voice and how a real agent builder is actually incorporating some of these practices. Thank you to all of you for joining us. As Runa mentioned, we're at AIUC1.com. Please reach out if we can be helpful, and we look forward to working with many of you in the future.